Then it has, yes, I think we are live.
Yep, that's what it says.
All right, we're live. Hello, if you are out there and you were waiting for this show. I don't want to pass the buck, but this is 100% Zoom's fault. Probably a little bit of user error as well. My name's Scott Whitehair. I'm thrilled to be your host tonight for this performance. We apologize for the technical difficulties. We're all in our daily lives dealing with technology. We've never dreamt that we were going to be essential for our work. So I think we're over the hump now. It looks like we're live on Facebook. I think we are even live.
We're on YouTube.
Oh, and now I'm hearing my own voice, so I'm gonna. Okay, so all right, we're doing it, everybody. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Facebook. And thank you so much for joining us. Again, we apologize for the technical difficulties. If you're just joining us now, you are here for Story Lab Chicago and Goodman Theater present Vintage Tales from the Third Age, performances from the stellar writing and performance program of Goodman Theater that works with tellers of the third age, 55 plus. I don't want to tell you too much about the program because I am fortunate enough to be joined on this Zoom call by good friend and colleague and creator of the GeNarrations program, Willa Taylor. So Willa, I'm going to kick it over to you and you can tell us about the history of the program, what it's all about before we get into our stories this evening.
Great. Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here. It's great always to be sharing stories both with you and with everybody out there. I hope people are having a safe and healthy Memorial Day today and remembering those who gave the ultimate sacrifice to keep us free and keep us safe. So GeNarrations, it is probably one of my favorite, if not my most favorite program. It started actually really back in 2009-2010 season at the Goodman Theater. The late, great Brian Dennehy, who was an artistic associate of the theater, was there performing in 2 short plays. Huey and Craps' Last Tape. And Craps is this really interesting play about a man who on his birthday every year looks back on his life and sort of listens to the recordings that he's made. And he is listening to these tapes over the years, over his 70, 80 years of living, and thinking about the mistakes, thinking about the adventures, thinking about the loves that he had all that time, and listening to these stories. And as we did a post-show discussion one night after this young woman stood up, probably 15, 16, stood up and said, you know, I really wish that my grandfather had recorded stories like that for me, because there are all these things that I wish that I had known about him that I never did. And that was really the impetus for starting the program. So we've been running this program since then, 10 years. We started with 9 storytellers at the Cultural Center downtown in Chicago, 1 place, and now we have 15 locations and over 200 storytellers, and you will hear 6 of them tonight, and I'm really thrilled that they're here with us.
Thank you so much, Willa. As always, it's a pleasure working with you, and it is an absolute honor to work with Goodman and GeNarrations program for this event tonight. In fact, in my classes and in the events I run monthly, I've worked with a lot of former GeNarrations performers, and without fail, they're fantastic storytellers. Without fail, they're incredible human beings, and I think that pertains to our cast this evening. A couple things of business for those of you at home. We know you're not in a venue with us, and we wish we were, and we can't wait for the day when that's possible. But your cell phone won't disturb us, clearly, but it may disturb you. So why not do yourself a favor and treat this as the live show it is, and turn that ringer off, or turn it off completely, and be fully present for these stories. We know what's happening. We know some things that are going on. You don't have to to check in on those things for the next hour or so. You can just sink back into your chair, your couch, and enjoy some stories from these stellar performers. Also, we know that we can't hear you, but that shouldn't stop you from hooting, hollering, yelling, applauding for these storytellers. We can't hear you, but maybe we'll be able to hear you. Or we can't hear you, but maybe we'll be able to feel you wherever you're at. So please feel free to go nuts for these performers when we bring them to the stage tonight. I'm going to start right now by bringing up our first performer this evening. She is from Chihuahua, Mexico, and is a self-taught artist in several media. She started writing to find the stories behind her art therapy work. So thrilled to kick off tonight's program with our first performer. Please put your hands together wherever you're at for Marta Alicia. Oh, let me spotlight you and unmute you.
Okay, my a period in my life from I was 44 till 47 years old. This happened on June 28, 2009. My whole life I have had problems with my period, but this time I began bleeding from 3 o'clock in the morning, nonstop. Plus, I was in so much pain that I was having trouble even to stand up. It was a Sunday, so my clinic was not open, and I had to wait for the next day to make the appointment. So I just say, I'm gonna wait to see if this stops by itself. And I decided to do like in Mexico, took several remedies, but that continued. I had my appointment till Wednesday, and on Wednesday I went to the doctor, and I had lost half of my blood level already, and I was sent immediately to the ER to have a blood transfusion. Later, I was at the hospital, and I was with two nurses. They came and they told me that they were going to put an injection, each one of them, to help me to stop the hemorrhage. So they did it. They left, and then later, hours later, a doctor came, and he told me, well, in fact, he didn't talk with me at the beginning. He just came and with a paper, and he was standing there with this white t-shirt and black pants, and he looked like he was going to regularly to the gym, and like he was kind of I don't know, bothered about this stubborn woman who was sick with no reason. He really didn't look like a doctor to me. I didn't like him as for impression, and I like him less after what he did, because a friend of mine, Elisa, was with me, and she is a white woman, so like I didn't exist. So he said, yeah, he started talking with her, and then she said, why do you not speak with her? She speaks and she understands English. And he said, still not looking at me, he said, well, and why you don't have a hysterectomy instead of getting sick like this? Well, hysterectomy is associated with an increased risk of long-term mental health issues, especially depression and anxiety, dementia, substance abuse, schizophrenia, change in hormonal status, mood disorders, fatigue, vaginal dryness, insomnia, loss of appetite, hopeless feelings. It felt to me like he was telling me, why you don't have the hysterectomy instead of taking this blood from someone who really needed it? He left. And he came later with a paper, and he said, you're gonna sign, I need you to sign this paper to release the hospital from any responsibility. This is what is gonna happen. If you want to have the blood transfusion, there are chances that the blood is gonna give you HIV. And if you don't have it, you're gonna have a heart attack because you don't have blood in your body. So I was in shock. I must have opened my eyes so big, and I say nothing. I remember my reaction like, so I again, he talked with my friend and he said, "Didn't you say she understands English?" And my friend told him, "But don't you get it? Don't you understand that both options?" So then he told my friend, he still told my friend, "That's what she should have, that hysterectomy. I'm gonna give you some time to think about it." And then he left us there. And I asked my friend Elisa, I pray for the blood not to be contaminated. So I went on with my transfusion. Before this moment, I have done an extensive research at the library because I knew that the possibility of that surgery. I spent hours and just finding that the cause of my bleeding was a fibroid that could shrink when menopause kicked my body. So just the thought of losing my uterus was killing me. Nobody tells you that you will experience grief because it's a loss, it's an amputation. It's an amputation. Even when women don't do like men touch your vagina, like, oh my God, and when they are told that they can have their penis amputated, you know? Plus, the other is, what about the months that I was going to be with a job? What about who was going to take care of me? The possibilities of infection. There's so many things that the doctors don't tell you. I could see myself homeless, sick, and with no uterus. 600,000 American women in the United States have hysterectomies, each according to the CDCP. Alternatives, though, are there for 90% of these surgeons do. On January 8, 2011, I got sick again. It was like a year and a half after. I was doing everything the doctor advised. I was doing everything, but I got sick again. Nothing worked. This time I had an appointment with a Dr. Janice Rushback. Janice Rushback was this petite, skinny lady with long gray hair. She brought calm and peace to the room when she came. She looked to me more like an angel than a person. The time she came to the office, it felt like the time stopped. She listened to everything I had to say about my anguish and my distress for this surgery. I told her, I know what the hysterectomy does. I say, I saw my Aunt Rosita. She became insane. What if I am someone that doesn't need this surgery? What if I am on that 90%, I say. So she asked me with the same voice, calm and soft, are you married? And I say, no. Do you have children? I say, no. And that made me start crying and crying. She says softly again, do not. Listen, do not let them to do that surgery. Again at the ER with a male doctor, he asked me how I was. 47, I say. Do you have children? He say, and I say, no. Again, I start crying and sobbing. This was bad. But it made me feel really angry that I didn't know why I was crying. He was like, why is she crying? Later, I started thinking and putting these things on feelings on painting, art therapy, and all that. And I just realized how awful to this place in my life where I had lost the opportunity to have my own kids. How did that happen? You know, how it is possible that if I had so much love for children, I was never going to have my own. I was never going to see features of myself on my or grandchildren. All I have done in my life was work and survive. I had missed living the motherhood part. The doctor left and came back again with the same question. Why not having the hysterectomy? I didn't do it. I didn't have the hysterectomy. On October 2012, I had my last third blood transfusion. Few years after, menopause came to my life and I learned to love hot flashes. I still love them. What it was awfully hurtful during this time, during all these years of sickness, it was a dismissive way how women are treated. For some men, it's like women, like the hysterectomy is like taking out mucus of your nose. I wish every time every doctor asked me, why you don't have a hysterectomy? I wish I had said, and why you don't have a penectomy? Thank you.
Please put your hands together for Marta Alicia. I can unmute all of our performers on. Feel free to give Marta Alicia another round of applause wherever you're at. Go nuts. Thank you so much, Marta, for your story. Really, really appreciate you sharing that and kicking off tonight's performance. As we've all moved into the online space, we're finding different ways to, whatever we do, to bring it to people and stay connected. I know with Storytelling, Story Lab is now online. This much is true. We have some open mics I can mention later. Willa, how can people find out about Goodman Theater? What's going to be going on online and some, just to get general information as the theater segues into this new world we're living in?
Yeah, so we have just finished streaming our production of Schoolgirls, which was scheduled to open the day that we all went into lockdown. And the next thing up, of course, will be summer programming, which means another round of Generations. So if you're interested at all in participating in Generations, all you have to do is email generations@goodmantheatre.org. And that's theater, THEATRE.org. So Generations, GeNarrations @goodmantheatre.org. We would love to have you. And of course, now location doesn't matter. So you can join us from wherever you are.
That is awesome. Thank you, Willa. And also we can put that information for sign up for Generations in the Facebook comments and make sure that people have it there on the YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube as well. Also, speaking of the comments, I want to remind any of you watching tonight, if you want to thank the performers or say, oh, I really love that story, we're going to leave these videos up. So they will most certainly have a chance to read your comments and to get your reaction. So feel free to leave those things for them, as I know they'd love to hear from you. We don't get to hear your applause or any of that, but we can definitely catch up with you after the performance. For now, I'm going to bring up our next performer this evening. She's enjoyed being a member of Generations for many years. This experience, she says, has broadened her writing and storytelling ability. She's read personal narratives with Second Story in town and also performed with my show, This Much Is True. And I had a blast then. I'm working with her and I'm excited to hear tonight. Please put your hands together for Sandra McCollum.
Thank you. When I was 5 years old, between first grade and second grade, my mother started sending me to the grocery store, which was 3 blocks away, in the heat of the summer. I can't begin to tell you how I hated that experience. My sandals rubbed against the backs of my legs and the perspiration rolled into my eyes. But the instructions that my mother gave me made me so frustrated, I didn't know what to do. She said, now, Sandra, the neighbors tell me you don't speak. You must speak to the neighbors. But Mama, it's too hot and they ask you too many questions. And Miss Jo sits on her porch in that white apron draped across that long black dress with huge black shoes, talking to herself in a foreign language. And when I speak to her, she doesn't even look at me and she just continues to chatter in that strange language. The children tell me she's crazy. Now, Sandra, my mother said, don't say ugly things like that. Miss Joe is not crazy. And she's speaking Yiddish. That is her language. She was in a war in Europe, and she is traumatized by that experience. They call it shell shocked. So say hello to Miss Joe, whether she answers you or not. Yes, Mama, I said. But whenever I got close to Miss Joe's house, I crossed the street so I would not have to speak to her. Then I would encounter Miss Delahousie, who was my nanny from the time I was a baby until I was old enough to go to nursery school. She sat underneath a sign that said modiste, meaning that she was skilled in every area of stitchery. Her clients came for beading and smocking and tailoring. She could even make hats. Hello, Sandra, she said. I said, hello, Miss Delahousie. Her family came from New Iberia, which was in the heart of Cajun country. They were so kind to me. Are you coming to see us this afternoon? Yes, I answered. We'll go in the yard and pick flowers. I said, oh, I look forward to that so much. The next block was filled with freshly painted houses with no trees in front of them. And the sun shone brightly in that block. But on the opposite side of the street, tall walnut trees lined the street, casting an eerie shadow on the ground as the leaves gave a lacy effect when they moved back and forth with the wind. The children told me there were spirits on that side of the house, that side of the street, that lived in the weathered shotgun houses that lined that street. There was an old Creole woman who usually sat on one of the stoops with her head wrapped in a tillon and a long tattered skirt and blouse. She wasn't much taller than I was, but I thought she was a spirit as she puffed on her pipe and stared at me. So I never crossed to that side of the street. I finally got to the Hill store and I saw my friend, the old man with his dog. He said, Sandra, are you going to come out and play with Pal after you go in the store? Yes, I promised. I went in and bought Mama's calf's liver as she had instructed me. Don't come home with beef liver, she said. If you do, I will send you back to the store. Be sure you have calf's liver. Yes, Mama, I said. I went outside to play with the old fat cocker spaniel dog. The old man gently turned the dog over on his back and surprisingly began to massage his testicles. I could feel perspiration rolling down the backs of my legs, and Mama's calf's liver suddenly began to feel hot and squishy against my chest. It was so confusing. He said, Sandra, do you know what this is? I stared down at the ground. I said no and shook my head. He said, this is his dick. He used that ugly word that the children used at school, and Mama had told me that that was not a nice word. I didn't say anything. I continued to gaze down at the ground. He said, Sandra, you look so hot. Would you like to come upstairs with me and Pal? I can offer you some ice cream to cool you off. No, thank you, I said. I have to go home and take my mother this liver as I started backing away. He said, wait, and reached into his pocket with the same hand he had massaged the dog's testicles and tried to hand me a nickel. I said, no, I can't take your nickel. Daddy said that he could give me all the money I need and I shouldn't take money from strangers. I'm not a stranger, he said, smiling. I see you every day and you play with Paul and stop and talk to me. I quickly crossed the street as he was yelling to me, maybe tomorrow. As I got into the middle of the block, I gasped for breath and suddenly I was crying. I couldn't stop. My body was convulsing and shaking because I knew this was something I should tell Mama, but I couldn't. As I walked down the street, suddenly somebody grabbed me and I looked and it was the old Creole woman with the pipe. And she pulled me over to her and she said, Chef, what's wrong? Why are you crying? I shook my head. I wouldn't answer her. She took my package of liver and put it on the stoop next to her and pointed to the opposite stoop and said, sit here, Chef. Sit here. Calm yourself. When you have quieted, tell me why you are crying. I sat still, long enough for both of us to merge into the shadows that were being cast by the tall willow trees above. The otherworldly feeling I had didn't frighten me as much. The wind began to blow softly and the temperature shifted and I cooled and calmed and I told the old woman about the old man and the dog. She said, oh, Sha, you must go home and tell your mama what happened. I said, no, I can't. My daddy has a gun and he will come and kill him. She said, oh, no, baby, he won't do that. I said, yes, he will. She said, go home, tell your mama. She handed me Mama's package of liver and I walked the 1 block to my house and I said nothing about my pretending danger. The next day, Daddy left to go to his job on the train as a railway mail clerk. He worked for the government. It was like working as a postman on the train, sorting the mail. And he had a government issued gun. He was usually gone 2 days. Perhaps you have seen them in cowboy movies. They usually wore visors when the outlaws or the Indians tried to rob the trains and they shot back at the outlaws. Well, that was what my daddy did for a living when I was a little girl. And that is why he had a gun. On the evening that my daddy left to go to Houston, the old woman walked down to my house and told my mother what I had told her. I didn't hear what she said, but I watched her through the slats of the louver doors in the living room, and Mama came inside and called the police. When the police came, 2 great big policemen stood outside and seemed very uncomfortable in the heat and were frowning, listening to what Mama was saying. A dentist, you said? A white man? Yes, Mama said. Well, he hasn't done anything wrong. We can't arrest him. And Mama said, well, actually, I was calling for his protection because I can assure you when my husband comes back in town, he will definitely kill him. And I don't want my husband to go to jail. Very well, they said, we'll go and talk to the manager at the Hill store. They left, and that afternoon, the Hill store manager, Mr. Roberts, came to our house just before the streetlights came on. Again, I couldn't hear what he was saying to Mama, but the next time I went to the Hill store, the old man and the dog were not there. Years later, perhaps 30 or so, Mama and I reminisced about this experience. What happened, Mama? You never explained to me what happened. She told me that when Mr. Roberts moved to New Orleans from Mississippi, he was not accustomed to the cordiality and the gentle ways in which Blacks and whites and rich and poor got along in New Orleans. We were all neighbors. There was no separation of us. We were cordial to one another. But Mr. Roberts called all white women Mrs. and addressed them by their last name. And he called all of the colored women by their first name. That is, except Mama, who corrected his rude liberties and told him her name was Mrs. Starks. He therefore did not call her anything. But the years passed, which obviously softened Mr. Roberts. When he came to our house that afternoon to report to Mama what the police had told him, he said, "Mrs. Starks, I'm here to tell you that you needn't worry about Sandra's safety anymore. When she comes to the store, I will watch her the first block. The old man is gone. I gave him until sundown to leave. When the police told me they couldn't do anything because he had not committed a crime, I told them that I could. It was in my power, and I evicted him." Mama said the second surprising thing about that event was your daddy and I had no idea you had such insight into his character. He was such a mild-mannered person, but apparently you knew that if his family was threatened, he wouldn't hesitate to kill. I was really grateful that you had not told that story in front of him, and everything worked out for the best. From that day forward, Mr. Roberts watched you the first block, the old Creole woman watched you the second block, and Miss Joe and Miss Delahousie watched you until you were all the way safely home. Your neighbors loved each other. So this is the story of what happened to me when I was 5 years old that summer between first and second grade.
Please put your hands together for Sandra McCollum. Sandra, thank you so much for that story. Really appreciate you sharing it with us tonight. There's a lot of storytelling again online. We've been kind of forced to move into this platform to connect with each other. And tonight you're getting to hear some stories. We talked about one opportunity for you to tell them, the GeNarrations program. The information is now in the feed on YouTube and Facebook. But I also wanted to mention our open mics, Do Not Submit Chicago, which has taken place usually up to 10 times a month all around the city. We have an amazing crew of hosts who make it a thing and make it work. They're the sole reason it exists. They'll show up and create space. Again, unfortunately, right now, as we all know, we can't meet together. So we've moved these online as well. If you go to Do Not Submit Chicago on Facebook, you'll find information about upcoming open mics. We call it obnoxiously enthusiastic. There's no judgment, pressure, scoring, any of that stuff. Really, if you've never done this, it would be a great way to do it. If you have a story and you do this and you know it doesn't work yet, that would be the perfect place to tell it. The next one of these will be hosted by our good friend Kevin Biolsi on Wednesday at 7 p.m. And if you go to Do Not Submit Chicago, you'll get information on how to sign up, because we love that you're here to hear stories tonight, and we would love for you to tell them, whether it's through GeNarrations, Do Not Submit, or any other way that you see fit. For now, I am going to bring up our next storyteller tonight. He is an actor, director, writer, and storyteller. He's told stories at Do Not Submit, 10 by 9, and Backroom Stories. He's worked with Forks and Hopes Ensemble, Red Tape Theater, Profiles Theater, Oak Park Festival Theater, and Timeline Theater. It's a pleasure to get him up on our stage here. Please join me in welcoming to the stage, Errol McClendon.
There was one.
No, it's running late.
There was one at the Science Museum at the Texas State Fairground. There was one at the baseball field at Mississippi State University. There was one in the sub-basement of the library at Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi. Bomb shelters. I even stayed in the one in the sub-basement of the library. October 27th, 1962, all of the administrators and their family met at the bomb-proof door at 5 p.m. My mother told me that it was just going to be a fun night to see what it would be like to spend the night in a bomb shelter. The truth is that we were on the brink of a nuclear war. My mother and father went to sleep that night, convinced that they would wake up to find out that nuclear missiles had hit Florida, Atlanta, New Orleans, Birmingham. Those were the cities within the range of the missiles that had been put into Cuba by Russia. I took a small suitcase with a pack of cards, some paper and colored pencils, and some snacks. My parents, on the other hand, took two huge suitcases, which seemed strange to a 9-year-old at that point for a one-night stay. I was the only kid there my age, so it was a long and boring night. My mother played cards with me for a while, and then I took my pencils and paper and started drawing pictures. Ironically, since it was a bomb shelter, I drew pictures of planes dropping bombs on the city, while my parents had whispered conversations with the adults in the room. There was a news radio that stayed on all night in the next room, but didn't raise any red flags to a 9-year-old. The next morning, after we got an all clear, we left the bomb shelter to a world just as they had left it the night before, but not exactly. Years later, when I went to school at Delta State in 1972, this library had been changed to the Fine Arts Department. Now, the Fine Arts building was open 24/7 to art students. I took several classes, so I had access to it. They didn't want art students doing messy art projects in the dorm rooms. One afternoon while I was working there all alone, I wondered if that bomb shelter still existed in the sub-basement. I went to the west staircase, down one flight of stairs. There was phone equipment, heating, air conditioning, storage. Down the second flight of stairs, and there it was, that bomb-proof door. I swung it open and cut on the lights, and there was that bomb shelter, literally frozen in time, exactly as we had left it that late October morning. Now, for a freshman living at home, dating a sophomore living in the dorm, there was very little opportunity for intimacy. So this was a golden find. I jumped in my car, drove to the dorm to pick up my girlfriend, who would become my wife, my first wife, and we walked back over to the art department, telling her along the way what I had found. Now, Cindy was a little hesitant at first. She was afraid we'd get into trouble. But when we got there, we checked to make sure we were the only ones there, went down 2 flights of stairs into the bomb shelter. And once we smoked a little dope, we started making out and everybody relaxed. Now, Cindy had an 11 p.m. curfew, so about 10:30 we started getting put back together. But when we started to leave, we found the door had gone shut and had sealed. And we panicked. We broke apart a metal chair and started banging on the door, and we kept that up for a full hour. And then we realized that that was useless. We should wait until the morning when there might be more people in the building. We had bathrooms that worked. We had 20 bunk beds that we could sleep in. And we even had food. The military rations were still there, and the water was drinkable. The crackers were stale. We didn't even attempt the potted meat. Now, when you're in a space with no windows and no concept of time, I woke up 3 times that night, certain it was morning, but it wasn't. But the 4th time I woke up, I found out it was 11 a.m. We immediately started banging on the door again. And after about an hour, we decided to take a break for some breakfast, lunch, crackers, water. And because we were exhausted, we both fell back asleep. We were awakened by the sound of the door creaking open about 3 p.m. and there stood campus security and my mother, who was in hysterics. you know, if I had just driven the car back to the art department, they probably would have found us right away. But since I'd left the car at the dorm, they had no idea where to start looking for us. Cindy and I were given probation for the remainder of our stay at Delta State. That meant if we got into any kind of trouble, we would be expelled. And I even checked, if I went away and came back and got a job there as an instructor or a professor, I would still be on eternal permanent probation. The door was welded shut after they took everything out of the bomb shelter. But I took something out as well, something I found that night with Cindy. Some very childish drawings of planes dropping bombs on a city, drawn by a very naive 9-year-old 10 years before on the night of a crisis. Little did that kid know that 10 years later, he would cause a crisis just looking for some place to just smoke a little dope and make a little love. Thank you.
All right, put your hands together for Aaron McClendon. Thank you so much, Aaron. We really appreciate you sharing that story tonight.
Yeah.
We're going to keep things moving along with our next storyteller this evening. She is a writer with a background in broadcast communications, public relations, public speaking, image, personal and professional development consulting. She's currently employed as a senior business consultant with the Department of Business Affairs in the city of Chicago. Please put your hands together for BJ Parker.
Hello. I was 12 when I first became aware of homosexuality. Because mom worked, she asked me to show an apartment that we had for rent in the family building. Jay, I gotta go to work. You stay your tail in the house in case someone read the for rent sign and want to see the apartment. Do not leave the house. You hear me, girl? Yes, ma'am. Oh, day after day, day after day. One day, the doorbell rang. I sprung into action and answered the door to a tall, handsome, slender Black man in his late 20s, early 30s. He was dressed in black with a black beret. I had never seen anyone like him. He said, "Hello, I saw the sign that you have an apartment for rent. My name is Delphin Samuels." I said, "Hi, I'm Jay. Come on in. I'll show you the apartment." He followed me down the stairs into the basement apartment. He looked around and he said, I think this might work. I said, "Well, you have to talk to mom." I gave him the information and he said, "Well, I hope to see you again, Jay." I said, "You too, Mr. Samuels." He said, "No, please call me Delphin." I said, "Okay, Delphin, hope to see you." The next morning, the phone rang. Mama answered the phone and I could hear her saying yes, giving the person on the phone the details of the apartment that was for rent. She hung up the phone and immediately started laughing hysterically. She said, "That was that guy you gave our phone number to, Delphin Samuels, right?" I said, "Yes." She said, "He's a fag." And I said, "Oh, okay. What's a fag?" She immediately stopped laughing because she realized, okay, I gotta answer this. She's stammered when answering the question. Well, a fag is someone who likes someone who's just like them. I said, that doesn't make sense to me. What's wrong with someone liking someone who's just like them? I like my family and my friends. They're just like me. Well, Mom continued, it's a man who likes another man. I responded, well, what's wrong with that? Ma, you're not making any sense to me. Girl, hush your mouth and get on out of here. Bag? Delphin Samuels moved in a few weeks later into the basement apartment at 318 South Whipple Street on the west side of Chicago. As Delphin began to settle in, neighbors started whispering and asking questions about the well-dressed man who moved into our family's building. I thought Delphin was so cool. He didn't look like anybody else in the neighborhood, and just loved the way he talked, he smoked, and everything about him. And then I also got an opportunity to see his apartment, which was decorated beautifully. I didn't know our basement could look like that. It looked like something out of a magazine. One day, one of the fuses blew out in the basement apartment. And Mom called me, Jay. Delphin needs a fuse. Take this to him. Yes, ma'am. I knocked on the door and a woman answered. And I said, ooh, Delphin got company. And then I said, it's Jay, and I'm looking for Delphin. He needs a fuse. And the female voice said, okay, sure, open the door. I opened the door, and as I peered in, there Delphin was wearing makeup, dressed to the nines in women's clothing. He looked beautiful. My jaw dropped. Delphin started laughing hysterically. He said, the look on your face, girl, is priceless. At that point in my young life, I'd never seen a man dressed in women's clothing before. I later learned that Delphin was a transgender woman. I noticed more and more of Delphin's coming and going. I became curious. Why was he dressing up like that? And then, how was he getting money to support himself? He was never late on the rent. Then I learned Delphin was working in nightclubs on the north side as an entertainer, saving money to have this gender reassignment operation. Delphin and Mom became really, really close. Mom was there when Delphin went to have the surgery. So month after month, Delphin would go for all of these appointments, and then he report everything back to Mom. So she arranged to take off work to be with Delphin to go for this surgery. Oh my goodness. Then Delphin changed his name to Vera. I said, oh. And then I asked Mom, I said, Mom, well, is Vera still a fag? She snapped at me. Don't use that word in this house again, young lady. Vera is a lady. Vera was a pioneer in my own backyard. Black and transgender. And in the 80s, just like Christine Jorgensen, like 30 years before, who had gender reassignment surgery, where the views were very, very, very different. Vera, I think, was a miracle to me that people can be true to themselves. And even when they are labeled with offensive names. Back when I was growing up in the 60s, the term fag had, you know, the connotation of it was a derogatory term used for a gay man. But then on the other hand, it was used as a cigarette. I am so grateful for my mama because she taught me that everybody is the same. Nobody is better than anyone else. She had no problem renting to a gay person back in the 60s. And I am so grateful for that because I got an opportunity to experience someone who went through a gender reassignment surgery. So, you know, I started to think about Vera periodically. And you know what? I sort of think of Vera still as a fag, forever a girl. Thank you.
All right, let's hear it for BJ Parker.
Yay.
Thank you so much for your story, BJ. We really appreciate you being here and sharing with us tonight. Willa, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
I haven't gotten to ask you this in our Zooms. What's something you learned about yourself during all of this, the quarantine, or the weirdest thing you found yourself doing up to this point?
So I think probably the thing that I've learned about myself is that I don't ever have to put on pants without an elastic waistband again. That is my favorite thing. That I can just forget that. I don't have to have on jeans. I don't have to dress up. And I just keep on elastic waistband pants and shorts the rest of my life. The oddest thing I have done, I think, probably is this. Trying to tell a story on Zoom because it's such a weird environment when you don't have a live audience, you know? I mean, you know that there are people out there, but I just pretend like I'm Lucille Ball and I'm on TV and I can't see the studio.
Awesome.
What about you?
I'm with you on the track pants. So at first it was a choice and I'm like, this is super comfortable. And my laundry has been nothing but track pants, gym shorts, 1 or 2 button downs for things like this. I don't wear socks anymore because why? You know, I'm mostly in sandals or slippers.
Yep.
But I say at first track pants were a choice. Then as I continued to eat and drink on quarantine, it is no longer a choice because I had to wear some people clothes the one day and they were really tight. And I thought this started as an option. Now it is the option. So I've still got some time to get it together. I've got an exercise bike that I currently hang wet towels off from the shower. I'm hoping to turn it into an actual exercise machine and have the option of wearing pants again. It's
probably a good idea.
Yeah. The weirdest thing though was probably one morning I just decided to choreograph an interpretive dance to Prince's "When Doves Cry." I will never perform this publicly, but I have to say, in my estimation, it's not too bad for someone who doesn't normally choreograph interpretive dance. So
I got to figure out how to see that.
I'll maybe do an on-demand private performance if we have enough cocktails in a Zoom. For now, let's bring up our next storyteller. I haven't gotten to work with her in a long time. She was one of our hosts of Do Not Submit in Hyde Park way back. It's so nice to work with her again. She enjoys telling stories that educate, entertain, and inform. Her career as a CPS teacher and school social worker continues to provide great inspiration for her stories. She is looking forward to creating stories about her newest inspiration, her first grandchild, Maya. Please put your hands together for Damana Shauri.
School has become something very different in this era of COVID. But back in the day, I always liked school. And when I say always, I mean always. I grew up in Chicago, And I was one of those kids who 2 or 3 weeks into the summer vacation, I was ready to go back to school. I mean, really, who needs 2 whole months out of school? Not me. To hurry things up, I actually crossed the days off the calendar, thinking that would speed up the first day. And the first day was a really big deal. Of course, you wore new clothes. You had to have a new outfit, at least for the first day. You had to put your best foot forward and set the tone for the new school year. But maybe just as important as new clothes were the school supplies. No matter what you had left over from last year, you needed new school supplies. Pencils, pens, notebooks, glue, everything you needed for the school year. And crayons. Crayons were very important. And you had to have Crayola crayons, not some generic or some store brand, because those were too waxy and they always mess up your pictures. Now, even if you had Crayolas, you didn't want the 8 box. The box with only 8 crayons, that was not cool at all. You wanted the 16 or the 24, that was all right. But what you really wanted was the 32 or the 48 box. And you hit the jackpot, and you knew your parents really did love you if they bought you the 64 box. Not only did it have every color known to humankind, it also had a built-in crayon sharpener. And if you had the 64 box, you were almost a celebrity, because not only did everyone want to use all your cool colors, they also wanted to sharpen their crayons to keep them new looking. So you put all your new school supplies in your brand new book bag, and you were ready for school. One of my most memorable first days was in 5th grade. Our teacher was Mr. Thompson, and all the girls thought he was really cute. So that first day, we spent most of our time smiling and giggling about Mr. Thompson. In Chicago, the first day of school used to be a half day to give teachers time to get their classrooms ready for the rest of the week. Not much work happened on that day, except doing the universal essay, what I did on my summer vacation. But by the time you were in 5th or 6th grade, you had wised up and you wrote that essay at home and brought it with you, so that while everybody else was doing the essay, you could hang around and fool around with your friends and talk. So after we read those aloud, Mr. Thompson passed out the welcome back to school notes we were supposed to take home to our parents. Then he decided to have an impromptu spelling bee to round out the morning. I had always been a good speller, so I figured I had as good a chance as anybody else as winning the first spelling bee of the year. So the first few rounds went okay. And then when my turn came up again, my word was 40. I stepped up and spelled the word. 40. F-O-U-R-T-Y. 40. I was really shocked when Mr. Thompson said, "No, that's not right, but you have one more chance." I couldn't believe it. I must have mixed the letters up or something, because certainly I knew how to spell 40. So I stepped up again, spelled the word, still just as confident. 40. F-O-U-R-T-Y. 40. I could tell by the look on Mr. Thompson's face that I had spelled it wrong again. No, 40 is spelled F-O-R-T-Y. I was devastated. That was an easy word. Who couldn't spell 40? Well, apparently me. I walked to my seat doing everything I could not to cry. The last thing I wanted to do on the first day of school was cry. The spelling bee went on, but I don't think I heard another word. And finally, it was time to go home. Our class was lined up on the final staircase in front of the door, waiting for Mr. Thompson's exit sign. But instead, he called down the stairs. "Damana, will you come up here for a moment?" I wondered what on earth he had to tell me that would make me stay in the building one more minute longer than I wanted to. I trudged back up the stairs, wanting to get out of there. And when I got up to the top, he simply looked at me and said, "I just wanted to tell you, you have very pretty dimples." Well, as you can imagine, I was on cloud 35. Cloud 9 just was not high enough to explain what I was feeling. I floated down the stairs, and I think I was still floating 4 blocks later when I ran into the house to tell my mother what Mr. Thompson had said. That first day was fabulous, and 5th grade had started out with a bang. Because I liked school so much, I certainly wanted to become a teacher, and that's exactly what happened. I majored in education and started working in the Chicago public school system. As a teacher, my first days were very different, of course. Instead of being concerned about new clothes and school supplies, my priorities were to make sure my room was neat and orderly, and that my bulletin boards were attractive and said something profound for my students. I can honestly say I loved being a teacher. Can't imagine anything else that I would have wanted to do with my life. But of course, it wasn't all a bed of roses. I'm sure that over the years, there were things that I said and did that I wish I could undo. And one particular instance comes to mind. On that first day, I actually knew most of the students in my class because I had had them the previous year. One of the students reported to me that another student in the class, I'll call him John, had a body odor that had become a distraction. I took John into the hallway and asked him why he hadn't taken a shower that morning. He knew he was coming to school. John's eyes welled with tears, and I asked him what was wrong. He told me his parents had gone out of town for a funeral, and he was staying with an aunt, and her gas was cut off. Now in Chicago, if there's no gas, there's no hot water. John said he was tired of washing up with cold water, and he decided to skip it that day. He didn't think it would be a big deal. I felt terrible for chastising him. And then my maternal instinct kicked in. I gave John a hug and I sent him to the bathroom to wipe his face before he went back into the classroom. That experience really shook me. I had accused John of being irresponsible when the truth was he simply didn't have what he needed to take care of himself. I stopped and I put myself in his shoes. What must it have been like for him to have his classmates talk about him? And on top of that, to have his teacher call him out. I had always prided myself on being the kind of teacher that students could talk to without feeling judged or criticized. But on that day, I had come up short. I stepped back into the classroom and told my students that John was not having a good day and he needed their friendship and their support. And they understood exactly what I meant. John came back from the bathroom, and from every indication, the rest of his day was a lot better. Later that day, I talked to the principal, and we made arrangements for John to come to school early and use the faculty bathroom to wash up. That incident with John made me think of Mr. Thompson and the day of that 5th grade spelling bee. Mr. Thompson was tuned in enough as a teacher to know that he had a student who was feeling terrible, like a failure. And he took the time to stop, to lift her up. He made her forget about her disaster, and he made her feel all right again. And his kindness was so significant that she still remembers it more than 40 years later. I think on that day, I was able to do that for John, to give him what Mr. Thompson gave me. And I said a silent thank you to Mr. Thompson for his example. Perhaps the most poignant first day was the one after I retired. I was keenly aware of all the back to school preparation, school supplies and clothes on sale. And my teacher friends were going in early to get their classrooms ready. On that first day, I was feeling very nostalgic. And I actually stood in the window watching the students going to school, hoping that they were excited about going back and that the teacher would greet them with enthusiasm. I was a ball of mixed emotions that day. I knew I was ready to retire, but I also knew I was going to miss all of it. But my stroll down memory lane was interrupted by the phone ringing. It was my friend and former colleague who had already retired, and she knew me very well. She told me to get out of the window, stop moping around, and get myself together. She said we were going on a walk on the lakefront and then out to breakfast, starting a brand new first day tradition. And that first day tradition, like all the previous ones, has served me very well. Thank you.
All right, let's hit it again for Damana Shahuri. Thank you so much, Damana. It was so nice to hear a story from you again. Thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight. If you're watching this on Story Lab's page, or you're wondering what Story Lab's about, we're a new storyteller show. We're in our 10th year, coming up on a 10-year anniversary. This is not the year we had envisioned, but after pausing for a few months and doing some special events, which we'll continue to do, we're going to bring back that program, and it'll be online. So if you check out Story Lab Chicago starting next month, again, we'll have each month 6 brand new storytellers who have never done this before, putting themselves out there and sharing some of their stuff. Also, This Much Is True, our other show, will be taking place again next month, and Willa will actually be in that one, so we'll get to hear a story from her that night.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Again, there's so many great things online right now. We know it's not the ideal way to get to connect with you, but we're going to keep trying, and we hope that you continue to stay connected as well. We have come to our final storyteller of the evening. He incorporates storytelling as a celebrant for weddings, memorials, and other moments in life that should be celebrated. He's shared stories with the Irish American Heritage Center, Steppenwolf, Second City, This Much Is True, Outspoken, Chimera Loft, You're Being Ridiculous, The Moth, Inspired Live Lit, Filet Solo, Story Sessions, and Goodman Theater. So happy to work with him once again. Please put your hands together for Patrick Curtin.
Okay, thank you. Where would I be without my straight allies? When I was 5 years old in 1953, my older brother Mike gave me the nickname of Avis. Avis was a neighbor girl that lived down the street that I enjoyed playing with. I mean, I thought girls were more interesting than boys, and hopscotch was a lot more challenging than cops and robbers. But my brother teasing me taught me to hide my true nature, which was a good survival skill in the 1950s when America was great. When I was 13, I kissed a girl for the first time, after which I threw up, not in front of her. But I decided that this was a sign from God that I was called to the priesthood, and seminary was fabulous. When we would goof around and have free time, we would act out scenes from Betty Davis and Joan Crawford in such films as Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Straight Jacket, and Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte. When I was 16, I shared with my confessor, Father Crosby, that I thought I was attracted to guys. Well, he assured me, you're an adolescent. You're going to have a lot of unusual feelings. Don't be upset. But you may want to get to know girls better and leave seminary. But if you decide you truly are that way, you don't want to become a priest, because there's a number of men in the priesthood that are that way, and they're very unhappy. Father Crosby, my straight ally. Well, I threw myself into teacher's college and my part-time job. I wanted to be invisible. My hope was to walk into a room and have people wonder, who just left? I took an abnormal psychology class, which is what we called gay studies in the 1960s. My instructor, Dr. Bernstein, was in her 40s and her platinum hair was teased up into a bouffant. She wore usually a black leather jacket, mini skirt, and fishnet stockings. I decided to present a paper in front of class on homosexuality. At the end of my presentation, Dr. Bernstein said, well, that was a very interesting talk about a subject we don't hear much about. Patrick, I hope that you found that personally very helpful. I looked at my fellow classmates, most of whom were girls from Catholic high schools, and I hoped that they weren't paying attention. Dr. Bernstein, my straight ally. When I turned 21, my sister gave me a jar of Vaseline and everybody laughed, and I wasn't sure why they were laughing, but I laughed too. Kate, my straight ally. Well, after I taught school for a year and I had my own apartment and I was financially independent, yet something was missing. And one evening I went out to dinner with one of my fellow teachers in the neighborhood. And as we were walking past this bar, Anne screwed up her face and said, "That is a fag bar." So I dropped breadcrumbs and returned the following week. Anne Hughes, my straight ally. Now, you've probably heard a lot of gay guys say, "Oh, you know, when I walked into a bar, I felt at home." And I did. But when I went to Sparrows, it was what we called a female impersonator bar at the time. And I felt at home not because I felt like the guys were my brothers, but the women in my family are larger than life. I mean, my Aunt Mary went on a double date with Joe McCarthy and Roy Cohn. I was very comfortable with Hurricane Summers and Artesia Wells and Mimi I'm First. I met a guy there by the name of Peter, and he was tall and dark and had a penetrating gaze. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but I would find out later that a lot of guys didn't use their real names at the bars. So over the next several years, I would meet a lot of Peters and Dicks and Rods. Peter suggested we go to his place, and I decided I was going to act like I had invented homosexuality. I mean, I was so confident. I was a know-it-all fag. On the taxi ride over, our knees touched, and I felt this electricity surge up and down my body. And when we got to his place, he pulled out this long, floppy, cylindrical object that I later discovered was called a dildo. And he began to put Vaseline on this dildo. Well, that was not a use for Vaseline that I anticipated when I turned 21. Next, he wanted to tie my hands behind my back. I decided this overconfidence thing is not working. So I decided to level with him, and I said, "You know, I've never done anything with a guy before, and why do you want to tie my hands behind my back?" Peter looked down. He said, "You know, I was in Vietnam, and it changed me. I'm not the same person. I saw things I shouldn't have seen. I can't explain it." Well, a couple weeks later, I ran into Peter and he ignored me. And I thought, you know, my straight allies have gotten me so far. Perhaps it's time for me to cultivate gay allies. Thank you.
Let's hear it for Patrick Curtin.
Yeah.
And if we could keep that applause going wherever you're at for all of our performers tonight. Let's hear it for Damana Sharuri, BJ Parker, Errol McClendon, Marta Alicia, and Sandra McCollum. Thank you so much for being with us wherever you're at. We really appreciate it. Thank you to this amazing cast for sharing your stories. I want to thank the amazing Willa Taylor for involving me in this project. It was an absolute honor to be a part of presenting these stories.
Willa.
It was great to be here.
Stop! Yay, Willa!
Yes. Thanks to everybody at Goodman who does work behind the scenes, like Gabby and everybody else who made this happen. Again, it was an absolute honor, especially on a day when we're honoring and remembering those who died for us to continue to be here, to celebrate connection and to celebrate the fact that we're still fighting and we're still doing our thing. We appreciate all of you listening. Without you, I always say every month at shows, without an audience, storytelling is extremely weird. So thank you wherever you're at. We really appreciate it. I'm going to kick it over to Willa to close it out tonight if you have any thoughts. But again, thank you all so much.
Yeah, this has just been terrific. I mean, every time I hear any of these incredible storytellers, I am inspired, I am awed, I am grateful, because I think we learn so much about ourselves and about the world from the stories that we tell. And now, in this kind of weird time that we're in, we need these stories more so than ever. So thank you, thank you, thank you to all the storytellers. And thank you, Scott, for this. It was great.
Absolutely. Thanks again. Everybody at home, have a great night. We'll see you hopefully sometime soon.
And tell stories.
Yes.
Yes.
This is only one way we do it. You call somebody up, new friend, old
That's right.
friend. This is just a more formal way. We should be telling our stories as much as possible.
That's right.
Yes. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay.